Welcome back to this i24 News Evening Edition, and this is One-on-One. Tonight, we have for you an exclusive interview with one of the top Israeli officials dealing with the Iranian issue in recent years. A senior diplomat in Israel's Foreign Service, Ambassador Jeremy Issacharoff, has served in several substantive diplomatic posts throughout his career. In recent years, serving as the Deputy Director General for Strategic Affairs in the Israeli Foreign Ministry, he has been intensely involved in the diplomatic battle against the Iranian nuclear program. He sat down last week with i24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev and discussed the diplomatic efforts regarding Iran and U.S.-Israel relations. Ambassador Issacharoff, thank you for speaking to us.
My pleasure.
2013 has been one of the defining moments, has been the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani's election. How do you think this is going to design the new Iranian Western openness? How is this going to continue and design 2014?
Look, I think it's still very early to judge. I mean, there are different opinions about the overall impact of Rouhani's election in Iran. And, you know, we're watching, obviously, this very closely. And we look at the whole pattern of events and policy within Iran. And while there may be certain obvious differences inherent in his election, we still see a very consistent pattern in Iranian foreign policy as a whole. And above all, one of the things that even we look in the internal sector in terms of human rights, we still don't see any sort of sea change in what's going on the ground in Iran. For example, just since Rouhani's been elected, there's been about 450 executions that have been reported in the press. So, frankly, we're still seeing a very consistent picture of Iranian policy as we've known it. There may be a different style, but the substance in terms of the policy and how it's expressed on the ground continues to remain the same.
So you're saying that on the ground in Iranian foreign policy, the changes are not that substantial, but at least from the international community's reaction to the Iranian administration, there has been a dramatic change during 2013. Don't you agree?
I think that there has been a different tone emanating from Western countries towards Iran, and obviously Iran has tried to exploit that with a more engaging policy. But again, I think people have to continue to seriously analyze the rights of people, what's going on internally within Iran, and also, above all, continue to analyze the Iranian foreign policy as it is expressed in the region as a whole. And up till now, the policy of Iran has been, I would say, aggressive, clearly towards Israel. Their support of Hezbollah, I haven't seen any change in that. Their support of terrorist groups in Gaza, I haven't seen change in that. And I haven't seen any change in how they're conducting their role in Iran. And Iran has in Syria. And that's been essentially one of the main factors that has continued to enable the Assad regime to survive. So I think in the end of the day, people are always enamored by initial impressions, but these impressions have to be sustained, and they have to be shown to be providing a different policy. And as yet, we are not seeing that different policy.
The Israeli Prime Minister has been claiming for months now that that Rouhani's election has no influence because the real decision maker in Iran is Khamenei. But we've been hearing intelligence assessments from the Israeli intelligence itself saying that there is something going on in Tehran and there is some kind of strategic change in Tehran, a real decision to change the direction. Where do you stand on this?
There's clearly something that we've seen as a change in the policy in terms of Iran wanting an agreement. And wanting an agreement that relieves the sanctions on Iran. These sanctions are serious. They're tough on the whole range of issues in the Iranian economy, a whole range of sectors of Iranian financial activities, the oil sector, etc., etc. So there is a major impact of these sanctions on the Iranians. But we don't see that any strategic change has happened in terms of how they relate to the nuclear program. They still want, in our assessment, to have a nuclear program that continues to allow them to enrich uranium or reprocess plutonium. And from that point of view, we don't detect that there's been a strategic change in their attitude to the program. Do they want an agreement that relieves the sanctions? Yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to actually change their nuclear policy as a whole.
But how advanced is their program at this moment?
Well, their program is very advanced. They have two major enrichment facilities, Natanz, which is housing something in the region of 15 to 16,000 centrifuges as a whole. The Fordo underground enrichment facility, which houses another 3,000 centrifuges, enriching uranium to 20%. So there is a very considerable effort in the enrichment area. They're also building a research reactor, a 40-megawatt research reactor in Iraq, which essentially can produce plutonium. And this reactor is not yet operative, but it's possible that it'll become operational if the continuation of the building and development of this plant continues over the next year and a half.
Let's move on to the interim agreement that was signed in November in Geneva. Why was Israel's response so angry?
The agreement itself, first of all, it's a joint plan of action. A lot of people don't realize that this is not a signed agreement. This is kind of a plan of action that has been declared. This is not by any means a comprehensive agreement that deals with all the elements of the program. And as I said before, we believe that Iran wants to continue its program. And in that sense, I'd say that is the first and foremost concern that we have. This is the aim of diplomacy in our view. The diplomacy is meant to stop the nuclear program, not to enable it to continue and even get a sense of legitimacy. We're also concerned of the fact that there will be a measure of sanctions relief and that this provides, I'd say, some financial and economic oxygen to the Iranian economy at a time where they need to continue to feel the pressure.
But Israel and the U.S. have been working so closely on the Iranian issue in the recent months. The Obama administration proudly states that it has been in charge and part of the most comprehensive sanction regime put on Iran ever. And suddenly, after the interim agreement, you see this big public rift between Washington and Jerusalem. What was the big surprise?
I'd say that there was clearly a difference of approach in how we looked at the diplomatic options on the table and what we needed to achieve. And our relationship with the United States is very profound, very deep, touches virtually every facet of our bilateral relationship, and you can be sure that we will continue, and as we have done over the last years, to be very highly coordinated with the United States. And there are times that we might have differences of opinion, and we've had differences on certain issues, and it's very natural that friends disagree on things, but friends also know how to manage these differences and move on. And I'd say that that's where we are at this point. We're trying to continue this discussion.
But in the meanwhile, the U.S. administration, you were talking about the strength of sanctions, and Israel has been very clear that it is from its concern of the sanction regime collapsing. But at the same time, the U.S. President Barack Obama is urging Congress not to pose more sanctions now. But Israel, on the other hand, is on the side of the Congress hardliners who are calling to move on with sanctions now. But don't you agree that more sanctions now could torpedo diplomacy?
As of now, no sanctions have been relieved as a result of the Geneva Plan of Action. As far as we know at this point, as we speak, there is still no agreement regarding the actual implementation. The agreement the plan of action is supposed to run for 6 months, and the clock hasn't started ticking on that. And so therefore there has been actually no sanctions relief yet. and the sanctions relief that it is envisaged by the agreement is focused, it's specific, and there may be differences regarding the extent of it, what sort of extent it'll have, but it's still limited. The American administration has made it very clear they fully intend to continue to apply the core sanctions that are part of the essential leverage that is weighing on Iran in terms of the oil sanctions, in terms of the financial sanctions, banking, and other issues that are really the, I'd say, key elements of the leverage that Iran feels today. So, I mean, are you asking me in a sense, is Israel in favor of having this leverage, of maintaining this leverage at a time when we most need it in the diplomatic process? I'd say yes. We feel at this time that the key decisions of the Iranians are still ahead of us. They haven't made a strategic decision to give up their nuclear program, their military nuclear program. And that is where you need the most leverage for. So in that sense, I would say definitely you need to still keep that leverage on the table, and that would be the most effective way of ensuring that the diplomacy works.
But do you believe that do you believe that the Iranian regime can have this change? Do you believe they can have this change of policy, decide to abandon? Do you really believe they can do it? Or is it inherent to the Iranian foreign policy?
I think this is, it's a very, very tough challenge. I think the Iranians, frankly, are determined to pursue this nuclear option. But I think if there was sufficient, and I've always felt that if there was sufficient, concerted, effective diplomatic leverage on Iran, it could affect Iran to change its policy. There wouldn't be a guarantee that this would happen. But one thing can be guaranteed, that if there is no leverage, Iran will be on a path to becoming a nuclear threshold state and eventually a nuclear state. And that is something that we diplomatically cannot accept.
You represent Israel in many international forums. You've also been meeting in recent months with diplomats from Arab countries discussing the weapon for mass destruction in the region. How do you answer the question regarding the ambiguity and regarding blaming Israel of hypocrisy, demanding Iran not be able to having the right to enrich? Well, at least by foreign sources, Israel itself does have its own nuclear capability. How do you answer these claims?
Frankly, I must say that I think, look, people in recent years have come to understand that Israel is facing so many complex security challenges, so many major, difficult and demanding, sometimes even daunting security threats. You've seen the level of change that has happened in recent years in the Arab world, around us, our neighbors, only to look at the situation in Syria. The fact that well over 100,000 people have been killed just with conventional weapons. Not to mention the significant number of times the Syrian regime has actually used chemical weapons against its own people, and obviously the recent event in Damascus. So I have to actually say that that there is, in my opinion, a greater understanding of these challenges and of Israel's needs in terms of pursuing its own national security.
Looking into 2014, again, what do you think I wanted to ask what's the biggest strategic challenge for Israel, but I'm actually going to change the question and ask, what is the biggest strategic opportunity for Israel in these days?
This is a time of many different strategic threats that are evolving. I mean, you have the traditional, as it were, threats of Iran in the nuclear area, its missile capabilities, the terror that continues in the Middle East in a whole range of different contexts. It comes at us either through Hezbollah or through Hamas or Islamic Jihad in Gaza, but it comes into the area. And obviously these theaters, the Gaza and Lebanon, present specific challenges that we've just seen pop up in the last few days. There will never be a choice. One will have to look at the threats, deal with them, and use whatever means you can to stop them getting worse and to prevent them from being implemented. But on the other hand, the other part of that is to try and look at these opportunities, try and develop them, and see where we can go in terms of developing a common regional security paradigm that can help reduce tensions and increase stability for all of the countries as a whole.
Well, let's hope that's what happens. Thank you very much, Ambassador Issacharoff.
Thank you.
Thank you, our viewers, for being with us tonight. Tomorrow we will be here at the same time, same place from the Jeff Report. Have a great night.